Well, hello, my name is Brody. It's been a year and a half since I received it, and I'm finally making a review of Divinity Original Sin, the board game. I've played the main campaign and dungeon mode twice now. Here are the paths I took in both campaigns. I have a lot to say about this game, but does my opinion even matter? The only game I can compare this to would be the first Gloomhaven, because it's honestly the only other tabletop campaign game I played. That being said, this game is great. So what is Divinity Original Sin? The game is pretty much the first act of Original Sin 2, the video game, which I also love. The board game is a cooperative tabletop RPG where you play as a magic source-wielding hero. Up to 4 players, you'll play through around 20-ish out of 58 locations in a single campaign. The best I could describe it is like an RPG, escape room, choose your own adventure, based in Divinity's world of Rivellon. It's likely most of you already know the company that made this game, Larian. They also made the award-winning Baldur's Gate 3 video game. You start this game on a prisoner ship sailing to an island that holds more people like you, sorcerers. Essentially, the government in this world doesn't like you and they don't want you to be more powerful. Don't fact check that. I gotta brush up on my lore, I think. There's much more detail in the video game. Anyways, you want to leave this prisoner island, and that's the main goal of the board game. Okay, so before I rip this board game apart, with critiques, of course, let me tell you why I love it so much. Not only as someone who liked the video game, but someone who is a casual board game player. My hair will not stay consistent. So, there's a lot to talk about. First off, the visuals. Every little bit about the visuals in this game looks awesome. Sometimes board games that are based off video games will just rip the assets from the video game and dump them on like cards. While this game looks like they do that, they don't. These are all original art. Much higher in detail than the video game in my opinion, and there are a lot of items and skills that are in the video game and in the board game, and they both have their own differences. Here's an example, whatever I can find. The visuals stay consistent throughout the game. The weapons, the skills, even the locations. It's all fantastic. I got the hiccups, this is awesome. The player boards themselves are just so cool in my opinion. They have the cooldown bar, and you can customize, you put little things in the slots. I mean, it's so simple, but it just works and looks nice. Unlike my hair right now. It's so good. I love the player boards. The only thing I would change if I were to change something is to have a way to track your health on the player board and possibly even your armor, even though your armor doesn't really fluctuate very often. For the most part, it just feels like the video game. Some things had to be changed for the flow. It's a different medium of game, and it's bound to happen. So like the armor bars are different in the board game. The environmental effects, not all of them made it in. Crafting got scrapped, though it was going to be in the game at some point. They decided to not have it. The mechanics of the video game translate really well into the board game. Using a specific amount of action points dictates on how much you can do on your turn. The enemies are from the video game, but there are so many new ones in the board game that you've never seen at all in the video game. And on that note, there are 4 new origin characters that aren't in the video game either. Even the tutorial feels like the video game. And you don't have to read the whole rulebook to get started. Whenever a new mechanic shows up in the story, the Divine Atlas, which is the giant book that you play on, it will tell you about it. And it will mention the rulebook's page that goes deeper into it. You can play the tutorial with pre-made characters, or you can customize your own. The choices you make in the game will impact the story down the road. They have these cards called journal cards and ultimately put you on a certain path. The character progression in this game is cool too. With each level up, you can see your character becoming more powerful. You get more dice to roll, which I'm a fan of. I love dice. But something I wasn't a fan of in Gloomhaven were their cards and how they replaced the dice. I understood it, but flipping a card to see how much damage you do will just never be as good as getting a handful of dice to see if you're about to get the kill, you know? Also, while you get stronger, so do your party members, and you can strategize on different skills that complement each other's different builds. Your friend could have Fossil Strike, a Geomancer skill making the ground oily. Then you use your Searing Daggers that reacts to oily spaces that then turns into an area attack that damages everything in that space. It's like the video game. It's wonderful. The campaign has so many different scenarios. It really feels like you're moving from place to place, especially if you're using my Divine Immersion videos. Self-promo.
The ship creaks and sways on the ocean as you lie shackled to a table. A loud crack shudders through the vessel.
And if the game's starting to feel a little repetitive, take a break. Come back next week. It's so easy to just put the game away, close the giant book with the bookmark little ribbon thing, and then open it back up and get right back into it. It's easy and simple, unlike Gloomhaven. And the game adds some spice every boss fight. Each boss fight has its own little change of pace. They'll have different rules on how that battle works. A new gimmick that you and your party are going to have to learn to beat the boss. Okay, I'm adjusting this. It's too high. The main campaign's replayability is such a plus for me. With 10 different origins that have different passives, there's so many different ways to play the game. Some characters are kind of forced into specific roles though, like Beast. His passive gives him 3 extra health, and usually he becomes a tank because of that. Part of me wishes that passives were more customizable, kind of like how talents work when you put them on your player board. Like maybe each origin has 3 different options to choose at the beginning of the game, and each option kind of sticks with the vibe of that character. Maybe like Sabine, she'd get 3 rogue options, and Ifan could get some ranger huntsman options. I think it would have only added to the immersion of the game, feeling like you are your character and you're building your character more. But that's just me. The video game wasn't really like that. So if you're like me and you just want more gameplay, there are 3 expansions. 2 of them are known as side quests. Nemesis and Haunted Keep come into play during the main campaign and add more hours at the table. They also add more items to add to the item decks, even if you don't want to play the side quests. I do have some major gripes with Haunted Keep, but we'll get to that. The other expansion, however, is called Nightmare Dungeon, which can add modifiers to make enemies harder, essentially being a new game plus feature. You randomly choose modifiers to add to an enemy and they get buffed. For example, this one says can't take physical damage. The dungeon part can honestly be its own game altogether. It can be played in about 1 or 2 sessions. It's a much more consumable, time-friendly version of the game. You go to random locations from the campaign and you fight random enemies. After you finish a location, you are rewarded with a skill you earned from the minion you killed. But you are forced to use what skill school they came from. So you have to adapt your character as you go. I think it's sick. It's so cool. Dungeon mode also has a scoring system where you can see how well you did compared to the last time you played, or maybe you're compared to your friends. Okay. I'm sure I missed something, but when you are a big fan of something, you usually have big critiques as well. That being said, let's get into my gripes about this game. The biggest issue with this game is probably the difficulty balancing and the way it scales up as you go through the campaign. The first act of the board game, you're level 1 and 2, and it's probably the most difficult part of the game, but like in a good way. I've heard a lot of other players online say the first act of the game is too hard and they just lose all their gold. And to that I say, sucks to suck. And then after Act 1, things just get easy, and it doesn't matter what path you take in the game, it just stays too easy. Also, the game is 2 to 4 players, which they try to take into account, but it just fails sometimes. I've yet to play the campaign with just 2 origins, but from what I've heard, it's way more difficult and you earn way less gold. So you just have a harder time in general. The way it works is if on a combat card like this one, if there are only 2 origins, then it essentially spawns less enemies. As I've only played games with 3 and 4 origins, I'm not going to talk about how it is with 2 people, just because I don't know. More the merrier though, so play with more people. So in general, I think the game getting too easy after Act 1 is an issue of the players getting more powerful quicker than the enemies are. Remember those nightmare modifiers I mentioned earlier? Those come in handy in this case. For the most part, buffing the enemies fixes the issue. And speaking of the expansions, let's talk about the Haunted Keep side quest. Right when you hit level 3, you have the option to go to Haunted Keep. It's a great vibe and it's a good experience overall, but The issue arises when you leave and you go back to the normal campaign. You have the opportunity to take hexes out that will be attached to your player for the rest of the game. These hexes have a positive and negative effect on an origin, but you can negate the bad effect with some items. And that's where the problem happens. You end up being way too strong. An example would be this frothing rage potion that you never discard after using. It has the possibility for you to hit your own teammates, but if you have this ring, then you no longer get the negative part, so it becomes too strong of an item. I remember in the Kickstarter, they were talking about Haunted Keep and that it wouldn't give you any additional beneficial items that you can use in the rest of the campaign because they didn't want people without Haunted Keep to have a disadvantage. That clearly didn't happen. If I can find that clip, here it is.
I'm an RPG player. I finish a level, I kill monsters, I want loot, I want goodies. How do you give me that without completely overbalancing or underbalancing the game?
You take home with the rest of the campaign something that definitely impacts your play, and it does it in a way that doesn't necessarily make you more powerful, but it is something that you can't do without access to the expansion.
It was important while designing Haunted Keep to have the difficulty balance of the main campaign in mind. If the expansion gave players too much power and items, the rest of the game would become boring.
On another note, unlike the Nemesis expansion, you kind of just appear in Haunted Keep. There's no transition that brings you to it. Doesn't make much sense. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I misremember. If you were considering to get expansions, I would prioritize getting the Nightmare Dungeon, Nemesis, and then Haunted Keep last. And even if you don't play Haunted Keep, you get the items from Haunted Keep, and you can find them in the normal campaign. Okay, I want to stop talking about the expansions, but I need to mention one more thing when it comes to the Nemesis expansion. The whole idea of this expansion is that you sign a contract with the devil. When you do this, you get these little contract cards, and these cards have little beneficial things that you can add on to your character. For example, you take 1 less fire damage now for the rest of the game. But once you get deeper into that contract, you start getting negative things. So maybe fire is now you take an additional fire damage. But you almost never see these negative contract attributes. It's unlikely you're going to get that many signatures to warrant ever seeing those. You get more points in the contract when you get demonology skills. The demonology skills are good, but they're not that good, you know? So in the end, you're kind of just left with these bonuses from signing the contract that, again, another way of making the game a little too easy. Nemesis is great, though. I highly recommend Nemesis over Haunted Keep. Anyways, we're done talking about expansions. All right, I think that's all I had to say about the balance, which again, I think is the biggest issue in this whole game. But for the most part, if you want to fix those issues, you can download this PDF I made that has 21 different house rules. The link for that is in the description. Okay, the rest of the issues I have with this game are smaller, but they are still issues nonetheless. The time tracker. It's great. It gives you a sense of, oh shit, we gotta get out of here before. But because the balance issue, you almost never get low on it for it to matter. My main complaint about the time tracker is that there's just not enough events on it. When each round passes, there's a possibility of hitting an event. Most locations in the game only really have the one event at 0, and usually it says you lose, restart the location. I think they really missed the mark on this. It had so much potential. Like, it's still cool. It's awesome, but it's just lacking, you know? Like, I don't want to feel overwhelmed with events on there, but having at least 3 per location that isn't on 0 would be nice. To be honest, they don't even have to be that crazy. It could just be maybe like lore about the location, like maybe you step on like a slug. I don't know, that's weird. But who knows, maybe they just didn't want to add more location cards to the game, because there are a lot of location cards in this game. I think there's like over 1,000. Alright, next thing. The max level you get to in this game is 6, and when you get to that level, you are pretty powerful. Being powerful results in more complicated attacks with different bonuses. This might just be me because I'm a little slow, but it ends up being a lot of quick math. You roll the dice and you have to count all your extra bonuses as well as your negative effects. And it's really easy to forget some of them because there's a lot. This isn't that horrible. but it gets to a point where you're always having to double check if you're counting all the stuff that you need to count. And it does slow down the game a little bit. But again, it's just counting. It's not that big of a deal. And while we're talking about being higher level 4, 5, and 6 locations are abysmally lacking locations. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of locations in this game. 58 to be exact. But it feels like there should be like 15 more spread out through the whole thing, more so through the end of the game. Here's a visual of the average locations per level without the side quests. In some cases, you go to only one location before leveling up again. Not only does it not feel earned, but now the flow of the game is ruined because you have to level up, which is a process sometimes. Personally, I get my players to level up online at home. They use a little tier maker thing I made, which has skills and talents and whatnot. Link in the description. I think the average location amount per level should be like 3 or 4, no matter what path you take in the game. I understand that it makes the game longer, but I think it's worth it in the end. They don't even have to be locations where you fight. You can be doing puzzles or something, you know? I just want to feel like it's earned that I'm leveling up. I won't lie, the skills in this game are very enjoyable, but after how I saw the signatures work for the Nemesis expansion, it made me rethink on how they could have done things. So again, the signatures are counted by how many demonology cards you have. When you reach a total number, you get a new part of the contract. And the video game has a memory point system. Some skills are worth more memory in the video game because they're more powerful. And I kind of wish the character cards had a number on them telling us how much total memory we have. And the skills could have how much memory they cost. And this is how it works normally. You start level 1 with 4 cards. Then each time you level up, you get 1 more card that you meet the prerequisites for. Where this becomes confusing is when you want to respec and change your character up. I had to write up this little chart where it explains how to respec your character because the people I play with wanted to respec so many times and it's confusing to just read. So it's like a more visual thing on how much you should have at what level you are. The idea of leveling up and respecing sounds simple and normal, but you do get cards not just from leveling up. Like you get source cards and you can get overwhelmed with a big hand of cards. And you're like, when did I get this one? Can I remove this talent and still use this card? It's a mess. Or it can be a mess, especially when I'm confirming for all my players if it works. You're allowed to learn the same level skill you are or below, so you don't remember when you got that level 1 skill. You could have been level 6. But if we had a memory point system, we wouldn't have to remember these things. Maybe they just have level caps instead of whatever the hell you call it now. You just have to be underneath the total amount of memory you're allowed to have. Larian, maybe next time you need testers, you let me know and my friends and I can test some stuff for you. Okay, next thing. On another note, one issue is you often find things in this game are up for interpretation. Here's an example. The Huntsman's skill Ricochet. Is it a single target attack? Firstly, when you think of Ricochet, it's a projectile that rebounds 1 or more times. The card reads, make up to 3 attacks with a bow. In the video game, it's a single arrow that ricochets. But because it says make up to 3 attacks, it sounds like 3 separate arrows. You might think, okay, so what? One of the issues is, Ifen's passive gives him an extra blue die if he attacks a single target. If this was 3 separate attacks, he would get an extra blue die for all 3 rolls. As well, if he had a low-level crossbow, he is only allowed to use it once per round. So because he has a crossbow, he can't even use the Ricochet skill, or at least not to hit more than 1 enemy. Now, if the wording was changed to something like attack a target and up to 2 adjacent enemies also take the same damage, then this would be more obvious that it was a single target attack with a single arrow that just so happens to hit other enemies. But after all that discussion in forums and discords, Larian explained in the errata that Ricochet doesn't work with low-level crossbows, confirming its multiple attacks with a single skill card. This would also mean that Ifen gets +1 blue die for each roll. Personally, I don't think it should be called Ricochet. They should have named it differently. They should have called it Barrage after the skill in the video game. But what do I know? Anyways, my point is, The fact that this was such a big conversation with so many people is an issue in and of itself. And this isn't the only case of unclear writing. Yeah. Next thing. Okay, we're getting a little more picky now. So, not everyone loves grid combat. This game chose to go another route right from the get-go. They went with spaces you can move to, and the art on each space looks amazing and unique. Personally, my favorite thing about Gloomhaven was the grid combat and seeing all the different types of dungeons that we could make. But at the same time, was that a mess to clean up afterwards and organize? You have to look at a YouTube video to even begin to put everything back in that box. And for the most part, Divinity does a really great job with what they made. But some locations feel like they lack space to move, or even a reason to move around the board at all. Moving out of range of an enemy isn't really a thing in this game like it is in the video game. They will almost always catch up to you and hit you because they can walk so far. Or maybe their range is so far, and there's such a lack of space to move away, there's just no point. Not sure what the fix would be for this, but it's a smaller issue, but it's still an issue. Something I noticed when I was unboxing this game is that the miniatures that you get, the scaling doesn't really make that much sense sometimes. And the fact that this issue isn't really an issue is another gripe I have. There's a lot of enemies in this game, so it's unrealistic that they would have a miniature for every single minion. Although, I did see Darkest Dungeon had a crazy amount of minis. I'm just saying. Anyways, Divinity is labeled with standees, these little red standees with A, B, C, D, E, blah, 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 whatever. But they offer miniatures for bosses, and some of these bosses, their scaling is good, but others aren't. Look at Geist. This is how big he is in the video game, and this is his miniature. So it's like an issue that doesn't matter because you don't need miniatures in this, but for me it's an issue. I have this project where I 3D print all the minions. I have a big list you can look at if you also want to do the same. You can check that out in the description. I even have standee replacements with like the little rings and you put them in there. It's all good fun. And for my last critique of this game before my battery runs out, I kind of wish the video game was more like the board game. And by that, I mean something very specific. In the video game, instead of just having separate endings, I wish in the middle of the game it branched out, just like the board game. And the players would have to make a decision on which path they want to take, or maybe their actions in the past made them go in that decision. Essentially, I just want more branching, but I guess they kind of, did they do that in Baldur's Gate? I don't know. I haven't fully played it. But maybe in the third Divinity Original Sin game, they'll do that. Okay, so it might sound like I was more passionate about things I disliked in the game, but that's only fueled for how much I enjoyed playing this game. I'm sure I missed something along the way, but essentially that's my opinion and the gist of what I wanted to get out. This game's Kickstarter took 4 years and had one hell of a ride. And it turned out better than what I originally backed, in my opinion at least. There's some people that are pretty sour on how it is now. But overall, I would give this game an 8.6. It would be a 9, but I have too many critiques and gripes that they could have easily fixed. It's a great campaign game where you can see the light at the end of the tunnel, unlike other campaign games. Link in the description for my house rules, 3D printable stuff, or assets in general. There's even an AI rulebook you can play around with. Anyways, this took a long time. I'll see you guys in the comments. Take off, you hosers. On my Instagram and on my Twitter, I sent a link to ask me anonymous questions. The majority of these questions might have to do with Yellow Jackets.